Hi, everybody. This is Ken Corbin again, and welcome to another edition of the Manufactured Home Show. This is the program where I have an opportunity to interview the absolute best of the best in our industry, from retailers, communities, lenders, manufacturers, and suppliers. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions for future guests, simply drop me an email at ken@callkencorbin.com. In addition, for copies of this program, you can go to learnmh.com. You can also go to Facebook and type in Ken Corbin Speaker, where all the programs will be downloaded. Also, in the very near future, there's a brand new page on YouTube that's going to be called The Manufactured Home Show, and all of these episodes will be loaded, as well as on my website, callkencorbin.com, and just click on the little button at the top of the page that will say Manufactured Home Show. Today, we have a very special treat, someone that I've worked with, a great friend, Steve Anderson, who's a partner with MHC Capital of Los Angeles. And Steve is responsible for capital raising, structuring, and occupancy. He also oversees the firm's lending group. MHC Capital is one of the largest community owners and operators in the United States, and specializes in the Midwest and the Great Plains regions. Steve is a former senior financial services executive who oversaw a Fortune 400 firm's national network of over 5,000 financial advisors, and was responsible for $800 million of revenue and $9 billion in sales. A native of Iowa, Steve graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Northern Iowa. He is currently a member of the university's Foundation Board of Directors and holds a Chartered Mutual Fund Counselor and Chartered Leadership Fellow designation. In addition, Steve's a member of the Gamma Executive Committee and has been a speaker at numerous manufactured housing industry conventions, events, and meetings. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so pleased to introduce my dear friend, Steve Anderson. We are so glad you're here today, Steve.
Great, Ken. Thanks. Good to see you and good to be with you.
Well, I'll get right into it. Let's talk about, from MHC Capital's respect, what would you say is your broad offering for investors to try and meet today's market demand?
Yeah, I think, obviously, as of late, there's been an incredible amount of volatility in the markets, public markets. I think investors have, concerns about not only their principal values these days, but it's been a really find, enough yield to live on as they ascend as a group into, kind of their next phase of their lives, which is generally retirement and that sort of thing. And so I think we've worked really hard to try to meet that, those two kind of tests, that stability of principal and the ability to generate yield so that these folks have money to live on. It's been interesting to me in the, especially, during this COVID-19, and now, we seem to be in a different phase of that, and now is this kind of civil unrest. It's been interesting to me that the amount of investors that have come to us to try to solve those issues. And so, we're working hard every day to do that. We have basically three lines of business. We have our fund business, our MHC Stable Income Fund series that is really a good fit for those high net worth investors and provides that stability of principal. And I by the way, Ken, I think you would agree with this. I don't know a time in the history of the manufactured housing space where we have shined more than in probably the last 60 days, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I think this idea that the world fell down, and yet we in our portfolio continue to collect 97, 98, 99% of the rent, when I have, brethren and other parts of commercial real estate that are struggling to get 9, 10, 15% of the rent in retail. And even in the, Class A multifamily, they're struggling to get above 65 or 70% of the rent in. So I think we have probably proven to the world that, true, solid, affordable housing, especially manufactured housing, is a place to come and shelter if you are in a storm on your boat. It's a good port to shelter in, it appears.
I would agree. And that holds true also on the retail end for manufactured housing today. I've been speaking to a number of lenders, and they're telling me they're as busy as they've ever been, and the quality of the paper that they're getting today seems to be much richer because a number of people that were either laid off or furloughed, that would be, in most cases, the bottom of the barrel. So they're seeing a much better grade of paper coming into them, which I think is great. But what about the acquisition market? What are you seeing today out there?
Well, yeah, that's a loaded question. As we sit here today, the credit markets are virtually closed. To try to, Freddie and Fannie say they're open for business to do first position debt. However, these kind of draconian escrows. If you go to Fannie right this moment with less than a $6 million principal loan balance, they're going to ask for 18 months worth of escrows.
Right.
And their LTVs have come down significantly in an effort to be more defensive. And I think that's caused, a lot of as cap rates have compressed, as as more money is flooded into the space because of, I think, our former conversation, it just makes it almost untenable to do that. We continue to have communities under contract, and in fact, we'll close a large community next week. But it required that we got the seller to take back 75% of the purchase price for a year until we could get the credit markets to settle down enough to really, put together a solid program for sure. So I think it's tough.
Do you think it'll take a good year, if not longer, to have that happen?
Oh, I think that it'll be a gradual process. I think the agencies will have signaled already that they're reconsidering in this part of their portfolio, and I mean specifically manufactured housing part of their portfolio. I think they've already started to signal that they'll loosen some of those restrictions, but it's going to take a while. And then you've got the flip side of that, which I would consider to be the bridge market. These really good banks that sit in the bridge markets, and I mean, the usual suspects, right? It's First Bank, it's Key Bank, it's Wells Fargo, that sit in that, what I would consider to be a bridge to get to the agency market. And, they're basically dead in the water.
What about sales and collections? How are those looking?
I don't even know how to express what we're experiencing appropriately. Collections have not skipped a beat. In fact, I would argue that our collections are better, that we know our residents better now than we ever did before. We've really taken this time to drill down and understand their financial situations kind of one by one. We chose early on not to have any kind of forbearance program. We chose to kind of, battle them hand to hand. Let me tell you, there were some moments in April, early April, we were questioning, would we collect half the rent in our minds? And let's see, across the portfolio, and it's now 29 communities and almost 5,000 pads. We collected a little over 97% of the rent in April, and in May we collected better than that. We collected 98 and change, and I just ran the numbers in June, and granted, we've got folks that are on SSI and other governmental programs that don't pay us till late in the month anyway, but we're right on track to collect 97 or 98%. That was astounding to me, Ken. That was astounding to me. That's not the most astounding thing. The most astounding thing is that I cannot keep inventory in the communities. Our run rate of sales is up 38% during COVID. It's unbelievable. I'm not sure how to, I'm not even, I talk to investors about it all the time because we have a lot of investors and they have a lot of questions, right? There is, they've got other parts of their real estate portfolios that are absolutely impaired. And if they were in retail or they were in hospitality, they're impaired beyond belief. And they're just astounded that how resilient we've been.
Well, what about the credit markets? How do you see those not only in the short term, but in the long term? Speaking about credit.
Yeah, I think rates will continue to remain low for the foreseeable future. There is a theory being floated out there by the Fed that they might even see negative rates like Japan. I don't know about that. I do know that for what I would call the foreseeable short run future would be the next 24 to 36 months. I think we're going to see an incredibly low rate environment. The question in our minds, I think, is how quickly the banks respond and get back open for business. Remember that the majority of these lending institutions don't just have manufactured housing portfolios that are not impaired. They have retail, they have hospitality portfolios, they have office portfolios. And there is some systemic underlying damage to this economy that I do not believe that the public markets are recognizing. And it's at some point it's either accelerated the death of retail or it's adding to the death of retail, for sure. So I guess to maybe clearly answer your question, I think the credit markets in the short run are going to be disrupted. We're going to see different LTVs. We may see escrows, even from the bridge players. It's going to be harder to financial engineer transactions, I think, than it has been before. And it's going to require better capitalization by the sponsors, people like us.
Sure. Well, when you're looking at communities, what are your thoughts on the older or the aging parks and their subsequent, obviously, their infrastructure?
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge. If you think about as we sit here today in 2020, when you're looking at parks that were constructed in the 60s and the 70s, just the pure useful life of the infrastructure is in essence over, and it's causing a rebuild of the infrastructure, and that's, I think, our biggest question as it relates to other operators and opportunities that may come from other operators is, are they accurately forecasting the CapEx that's going to be needed to, in essence, rebuild these infrastructures? So don't get me wrong. I think the more pads, the better. I do. I believe that. I think because I think they're a lot more valuable than they even appear to be today in this low cap rate environment. I think it is if it's not the answer to the affordable housing crisis in this country, it's the best shot anybody has at the answer at the present, in my mind. But I think unless you're willing to really, and we say this a lot to each other, my partners and I say this all the time, we can't lie to ourselves. We just can't lie to ourselves. That's the number one thing you can't do and be successful in any business is you got to be able to say to yourself, this is the truth. And so we have spent a lot of time looking at infrastructures in our current communities and communities that we have under contract and trying to forecast and make sure that we bring in enough money to make sure we can handle these infrastructure issues that are arising. And they are.
When you couple that, there's always in the background that potential regulatory risk that we should be concerned about going forward. And I'm sure you have some thoughts on that.
I do. Yeah, it's concerning, and it's, for most of us, it's concerning on lots of levels, right? So you have just the idea of rent control and what that might mean to your forecast or your pro forma. and the work that you've done on that. There's also this idea about regulation around utilities. Even if you have private utilities, I think the states are going to probably ratchet up their thoughts around that. And then, you have the obvious one, which is we're experiencing right now. We can't evict anybody as we sit here today.
Right.
And each jurisdiction has handled it differently. Some have closed the courts completely. Some just haven't let you schedule a hearing, but let you file the paperwork. I mean, I think it's really kind of all over the board. So, regulatory risk going forward is an issue, and we need people we need elected officials to understand that, we're running a business just like, that they hamper us in that ability. It just costs more for the resident. It really does at the end of the day. It's unfortunate, but it just costs more. When we get hit with regulations, we're not working off of crazy margins that we're able to absorb that hit all the way. The residents have to share that with us. And I don't know to the extent. So we're trying to stay in states where we believe that the propensity for the folks that are in those seats are one of, clear thinkers and not overly influenced one way or the other.
Well, Steve, let me ask you this: for people that would like more information on MHC Capital, how can they reach out to you directly?
Sure. Yeah. So our website is mhccapitallllc.com. There's an investor section on the top. You can click on it. There's a form you can fill out, and it comes right to me. And I'd be happy to talk with anybody that's thinking about this space, or it's interesting. Over the last, probably 6 weeks, I have probably talked to more operators than I have investors. And that's now changing as we're kind of stabilizing, I guess, in COVID. But, it was good to reach out, and I talked to a lot of folks that I knew and some people I didn't even know that just reached out and wanted to talk about what they were doing and brainstorm a little bit about it and kind of better understand what we were doing, and we better understood what they were doing. That's all helpful.
Would that be the same, Steve, if there's anybody out there that's maybe looking to get involved in the industry as an employer, someone maybe wanting to make a change? Can they do the same thing? Go to the investor's website?
Sure. Yeah, just go to the investor site, click on it. There's you can fill out a very short form. You hit send, and it immediately comes to my email, and I'd be happy. My phone number's on the site as well. I'd be happy to talk with. The only rule, Ken, you know this because you've known me for a long time, that the only one rule I have in business is everything is worth a conversation. You just don't know the outcome of the conversation. So it's all worth a conversation for sure.
I agree. Well, I want to thank you so much. This has been obviously extremely educational, and I'm sure everybody out there will get a lot out of this conversation, either by watching or those that are downloading it for a podcast. But again, for everyone out there, if you have any questions or additional suggestions for guests, drop me an email, ken@callkencorbin.com. Steve, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great conversation, and we obviously all wish MHC Capital continued success in the future.
Great. Thanks, Ken. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye, Steve.
Thank you.